this inability to say no and all the different ways that we get there with ADHD is stealing your productivity. It's stealing time away from your business. It's actually stealing time away from your life and all the things you want to do there too. So it's important that we figure out, how do we do this? Because there's ways we can learn to deal with our time blindedness. One thing that I've learned to do when someone asks me to do something is I'll say, you know what, let me check my calendar. Because yes, I'm checking my calendar to see if the day is open, but I'm also checking all the things on my plate to see, is this something I have time, energy, and resources for? And is this really a priority? And it's not a moral judgment like, oh, I didn't make this person's want a priority, I'm a bad person. We all have to make decisions about what's a priority for us and what's not a priority. And so when you're in that situation, someone asks you for something, it's really wise to consider, is this a priority for me? Do I really have time? And there's ways to track that the ADHD way. And why am I saying yes? What's behind me saying yes? Am I just saying yes to please this person? What's that about? And in some cases, don't get me wrong, if you work in a corporate environment and you're saying yes to please your boss, that may be effective for you in that specific situation. I find that it actually decreases your value because then your boss just starts dumping everything on your plate instead of seeing your zone of genius, giving you that and seeing how far you can really take things. Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self-Loved Woman podcast. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about the 4 non-ADHD thieves that are stealing your productivity from your business and your life. So I want to start by sharing a quote from, I don't know if when people write a book together, I don't know who you cite. So it's in the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And they say, it's one thing to be distracted when you're trying to focus. It's another thing entirely to be hijacked before you even get to. And I was like, yeah, Gary. Yeah, Jay, try having ADHD, right? I was like, nailed it. And at the same time, right, we want to be careful about the stories we tell ourselves that we're always hijacked or that we can't do stuff ever. It's just that it felt like a familiar thing to read that and go, yeah. But the funny thing is in this book, he's not talking about ADHD. He's talking about just people in general. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about I should say there's 2 of them. But anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about these 4 thieves of productivity that they talk about and how they show up with ADHD, because they do show up a little differently based on the experiences we've had and a little bit how our brain is wired. I mean, that's going to impact everything. So let's dig in. The first one that they talk about is the inability to say no. And first of all, I'm like, isn't that all women? Like, no, I'm kidding. It's not all women, but a lot of us can have a really hard time saying no. And what I notice as an ADHD woman myself, as well as in the work I do with others, is that a lot of times we became people pleasers and perfectionists to avoid criticism, negative commentary, correction, all that kind of stuff that was so common for us with ADHD. You've heard me ad nauseum cite Dr. Michael Jelenic out of Harvard. He's a psychiatrist who conservatively estimates that ADHDers receive 20,000 more negative corrective comments by age 10, right? So that was pretty conservative estimate. So if we already are bogged down with all this negative stuff, criticism, basically getting the idea that we're fundamentally flawed, then a lot of us, of course, developed ways to avoid that. And one of them is people pleasing, and another is perfectionism, which is another story for another day. As part of the people pleasing, we tend to say yes to things. Now, I want to unpack this a little bit because, yes, Some of why we say yes is to avoid people criticizing us, correcting us, whatever. It can help them not be mad at us or mean. And I don't know about you, but one of the things that my little child Jenny figured out was that if she said yes to people and did all this stuff, then they had a little bit of more grace for me when I did kind of screw things up. Right? I didn't know I had ADHD, but it was something that my younger self figured out. And I got to believe I'm not alone. I got to believe some of you at least are like, yep, I did that. And you might be like, no, I didn't do that. Because we all figured out how to navigate our ADHD differently based on our life circumstances at the time and our inner and outer resources. It doesn't really do us any good to compare. It's just like, oh, this is what I could figure out at the time, given what I had. But if this is you, then probably you're still saying yes to lots of things. And the thing is in order to say yes to your business, you're going to have to say thousands of no's elsewhere. If you really want to grow your business, if you really want to be able to have this be what you do to support yourself and your family, you're going to have to say no a bunch of other places. I mean, like tons and tons and tons of other places, so that you have the time, energy, and finances to be able to support your business, to be able to grow your business, build your business, do work in your business, all those things. So that is part one of how the inability to say no shows up for us. But I think there's another piece to it. With ADHD, a lot of us have time blindness. So our brains tend to not really track time the same way as neurotypical brains. A lot of us aren't aware of time naturally passing, especially if we're in a hyper focus. You may have, I don't know if I talked about it on the podcast, but you may have seen on Instagram, I did a post on the ADHD tax when I missed my flight. Phoenix back in April because I was like deep in a hyper focus. Like I was at the gate. They even called my name. In fact, last week I met one of the people that was at the same event who's also from Minnesota. She was at the gate and she's like, no, I heard him call your name. So, right. So, like, that's how out of it I was. I even had alarms in my phone, totally gone. So, time blindness is real. And you may or may not experience time blindness. And it may be the same as mine. It might be more, I don't want to say severe, like it's bad. It just might be that time is even harder for you, linear time. And so, why is this important? Well, we say yes to things because we're like, oh, that'll just take a few minutes. I'll just do that real quick. That's fine. People, we want to please them to stay out of trouble, stay in good graces, whatever. And if we're like, well, it's only going to take 15 minutes, it's no big deal, half hour, I'll get it done. Not realizing that what we've committed to will actually take us 4 to 8 hours. Is this you? Are you like, oh, Jen, you're calling me out. You're calling me out. And I'm not like, I get it. We come by this honestly. It's just that this inability to say no and all the different ways that we get there with ADHD is stealing your productivity. It's stealing time away from your business. It's actually stealing time away from your life and all the things you want to do there too. So it's important that we figure out, how do we do this? Because there's ways we can learn to deal with our time blindedness. One thing that I've learned to do when someone asks me to do something is I'll say, you know what, let me check my calendar. Because yes, I'm checking my calendar to see if the day is open, but I'm also checking all the things on my plate to see, is this something I have time, energy, and resources for? And is this really a priority? And it's not a moral judgment like, oh, I didn't make this person's want a priority, I'm a bad person. It's just like we all have to make decisions about what's a priority for us and what's not a priority. And so when you're in that situation, someone asks you for something, it's really wise to consider, is this a priority for me? Do I really have time? And there's ways to track that the ADHD way, right? And why am I saying yes? What's behind me saying yes? Am I just saying yes to please this person? What's that about? And in some cases, don't get me wrong, if you work in a corporate environment and you're saying yes to please your boss, that may be effective for you in that specific situation. I find that it actually decreases your value because then your boss just starts dumping everything on your plate instead of seeing your zone of genius, giving you that and seeing how far you can really take things. But it's something to consider. So the second one of the non ADHD thieves of productivity is kind of shocking to me, at least. It's fear of chaos. And here's why it makes sense. When you go after your one thing, when you really are thinking to yourself, I'm going to do this business, I'm all in, that means you've said 1,000 no's to other things, thousands of no's to other things. And that means that there may be some other chaos. Because I will tell you what, like during my recent launch in August, end of July, beginning of August, whatever, my house was a hot mess. Like it was terrible. I'm not going to say how unclean it was. It's generally picked up, but even it wasn't super picked up, which is hard for me. But like super messy for a month and a half during my launch. And that was just what was going to happen because I wanted all my time, energy, and focus to be on the launch outside of my private practice business, right? Like when I'm with my clients, I'm with them. And certainly even my ADHD business, when I was with my clients, I was with them. It's just that when we really go for something and we really sink our focus on it, other things don't get our attention then. And that means some of those things may go by the wayside. And it might be that some of those things need to go by the wayside because maybe we don't have to have a kitchen floor that we can eat off of. I don't know where that came from, that everyone has to clean their kitchen floor every week. That's insane to me. No one's eating off my floors. Now, if you have a baby, I'm not going to, okay, fine. I understand that babies are going to eat off floors. But like otherwise, we don't need to have spotless homes necessarily. You might be like, well, Jen, I need to have a spotless home. Great. If that's a priority for you, so be it. I would encourage you to reflect on what makes that a priority for you. Where did you learn that? That's important. Because a lot of times that can be one of those rules that we were taught in society that just is kind of bullshit. So, and it might be true for you. I'm not, whatever. It's just sometimes when we have those things that we're afraid will go into utter chaos if we focus on our business, it can be helpful to think about what makes that important. What am I concerned would happen if I did let that go for a little while? And I get it. There's some stuff you're still going to have to do when you're going big with your business. During my launch, I double down on my meditation and writing because it's even more important then, and yoga, so that I'm present and fully there and focused. But there's other things that maybe I didn't do as much. There's a community I'm usually active in that I kind of was like, not right now. And I saw some of my friends, but it was a little bit more spaced out. We're reconnecting now. It's great. Their lives get busy sometimes too. But my point is a lot of people fear chaos. And so don't go for something and put most of their focus or all of their focus on it out of fear that everything else will fall apart. And it's valid. I get it. And at the same time, we can't hold all the plates. You got two hands and you can't walk if your feet are holding plates. I don't know. I've seen those pictures of people like spinning plates and they got a foot in the air or whatever. And you can't see where you're going if you got a plate on your nose. So really you can hold like two big plates. And it's important that when you are really wanting to build and grow your business, that your business is one of those plates. If you're a mom, I understand that you may have two plates in one hand, that your business plate may be smaller, and it might just be that you grow your business a little slower. There's nothing wrong with that. The thing is to be really clear and intentional on what you're doing and what is behind your reasoning for doing it. The reason that's important is a lot of times we do things out of old stories and big feelings like fear and doubt, and also finding ways to get out of uncomfortable things because our brains are really good at finding stories. I don't like to call them excuses because I don't know that they're excuses, but we have many, many parts of us who are like, that might be uncomfortable to do. Here's why we can't. And there's this big, long story. And I'm not talking about complex trauma history. I understand that there are some deep-seated traumas that people hold. And even as ADHD women, a lot of us hold trauma just from all the criticism being ADHD and rejection. I'm not saying that those things aren't real. And those are things we can heal so that we don't have to hold on to those stories that get in the way. Now, if you hear fear of chaos and you're like, my whole life is chaos, Jen, because I have ADHD. What are you talking about? Then maybe fear of more chaos. Or maybe this one just doesn't apply to you. Jay and Gary did not write their book for ADHD women, so necessarily. So, all right. The third non ADHD thief of productivity is one that no one's going to like. I'm just going to tell you. And the reason I know no one's going to like this is because I was a group fitness instructor for 17 years, and no one likes to be told that their poor health habits are impacting their life. So, poor health habits is number 3. And believe me, I get it, because it can be really, really hard to take care of ourselves, especially with all the other things that are expected of us, especially with a lot of us not growing up being taught healthy habits. And also, it's easier and more comfortable to just sit on the couch and binge Netflix and scroll on your phone. Whereas actually taking care of yourself, if you've not been trained to do it from a young age, can be really hard to get yourself motivated to do it. It's like, oh, do I want to go for a walk? Ooh, here's the next episode. Ooh, do I want to go to sleep on time? I mean, I can just watch one more. And I get it. I totally get it. I have been there myself, more around TV time. I've always been pretty good about getting in exercise. Meditation, hit and miss, but more hit for the last decade or so. But before that, it was really hit and miss. And my yoga practice has ebbed and flowed. Right now, I'm in a good spot with it. I'm doing more and more. And, sometimes I'll say that, and then all of a sudden I'll have a hard time. It's like the universe testing me. But my point is we all have ways where we could improve our health habits. And if you're thinking to yourself, Jen, all of my health habits suck, get out of my life. I get it. But hear me out. Here's the deal. When we do not get sleep with ADHD, it is a million times harder to focus. There's actually studies that show that when people have less than 6 hours of sleep for, I don't know how many days it is, they actually are as impaired as a drunk driver, but they don't know they're impaired. So if you're not getting 8 hours of sleep, and dang, if you're in perimenopause, I don't know about you, but I'm needing like 8.5 or 9 lately. It's like, my goodness, if you're not getting that sleep that you need, without ADHD, it's harder to focus. With ADHD, oh my gosh, seriously. So sleep is essential, but so is good nutrition. We need to eat nutritious foods with ADHD, and we need to have protein. Protein can help us sustain attention. Have you ever noticed, like, if you didn't have a lot of protein? I used to notice this when I ate a lot of cereal that didn't have any nuts in it or anything. Back in the day, I had Golden Grams. Oh my gosh, so good, but so simplex carbohydrate, not useful. But that's what I used to eat for breakfast. And by about 10 o'clock, first of all, I'd be hungry again. But second of all, I couldn't focus. No, of course, I didn't know I had ADHD. I had no idea what was going on. But it was because I didn't have any protein that was sustaining or satiating me and helping me sustain my attention. Protein is really, really important for the ADHD brain. I'm not talking about going crazy wild with it. You don't need to eat like 3 hamburgers at every meal. You probably don't even have to have a hamburger at every meal, but just some amount of protein. It doesn't have to be huge. There's lots of ways to get protein that don't have to involve meat. So if you're like, but Jen, I'm vegan, guess what? So am I. So I managed to get some protein at every meal, even if it's just some nuts or some beans or legumes, or sometimes the vegan meats can have protein. It just depends how you do it. So protein is really, really important. And so we're back to nutritious eating, because the other thing is simplex carbohydrates are actually going to make it harder to focus, especially sugar itself. Don't get me wrong, I love sugar. I have my little ice cream sweet treat almost every single night. And if it's not an ice cream sweet treat, then it's a cookie. And if we have like a lot of sugar and we get out of control with it, it can be harder to focus. So eating nutritionally is important. Exercise. Listen, like I said, I was a group fitness instructor for 17 years, and I know no one wants to be told to exercise. So get movement in your body. 30 minutes a day will help you focus better. It will get some of your energy either out or get you motivated to move. And also, little bonus there, our lives are stressful, almost chronically stressful. And as part of that, we can end up in our fight or flight response much of the time, which is not great because that's not how our bodies were designed. It's not how our brains were designed. And so we need to release that fight or flight energy lest it gets stuck in our body and we burn out. 30 minutes of exercise a day or movement, it doesn't have to be all consecutive, is the best way to release that extra energy, those hormones that were there as part of the fight or flight response. That's a whole nother conversation that I go into in a lot of other episodes when I talk about the nervous system. But if you've heard me before, you understand a little bit more about what I mean about completing the stress response. And basically, you're just using the energy that your body thought it needed to fight or flee, but it didn't need to fight or flee. So then it just gets stuck, right? So the exercise is important. And I'm going to tell you what, you get to decide what non-poor health habits look like for you. I find that meditation has to be a part of it with ADHD. And go ahead and groan. I get it. You might have even turned it off already. I'm not saying you have to sit there with a quiet mind and meditate. What I am saying is doing some kind of mindfulness meditation. You could do it moving, you could do it walking, you could do it candle gazing. I used to meditate when I run, or when I used to run, I used to focus on my steps and my breath. When I taught indoor cycling, I taught moments of mindfulness meditation in that. And so it really helps boost your workout, by the way, but also you're practicing mindfulness. And why is this important with ADHD? There are a gazillion studies that show it improves our ability to pay attention because it actually changes the part of the brain that pays attention. It builds that structure. And I will tell you, I notice a significant difference if I get out of my habit of meditation for as long. I think I talked about this somewhat recently that I was keeping up my habit of meditation during COVID, but was only doing like 1 to 3 minutes a day just to keep the habit. And boy, did I notice a difference. So take that, as you will. I also find it helpful to write every morning for emotional health, to dump my brain from all this stuff, but also to work with the big feelings that tend to come up with ADHD. But in terms of physical health, which we know mental and physical are connected though, but in terms of physical health alone, sufficient sleep, at least 8 hours a night for most people, nutritious eating, and movement every day is so helpful to your ability to function in the world, and especially with ADHD. So I'm not trying to be on a soapbox, but that is just one of the things that Gary and Jay talk about in their book, The One Thing. And they're right. I mean, it does impact your productivity because if you're falling asleep at 2 p.m, or you have a blood sugar drop at 2 p.m. because you didn't have enough protein at lunch, so now you need a Snickers bar. What was that old commercial? Not Give Me a Break, whatever, doesn't matter. That was Kit Kat bar. But if you're finding around 2 o'clock your energy is dipping, then first of all, you're probably going to grab something not nutritious. And second of all, you're probably not eating nutritiously enough or getting enough sleep. So to increase productivity, it's important that you're really taking care of your physical health, because when you run a business, especially at first, you are the business. You're like what's there. I mean, the business is not you, and you're the one who's running it. So you need to be at your best, or at least not at your absolute worst. All right. The fourth one is huge. And this shows up in so many ways. The fourth non-ADHD thief of productivity is that your environment does not support your goals. This shows up in so many ways. And a big way it shows up is that the people in your life might not be supporting your goals. And that can be really hard because when you're an entrepreneur, not everyone in your life is going to understand what you're doing, because it's not what most people do. Most people don't decide to start their own business. It's a risk. When you start your own business, it's a risk. I don't know if you know that, but as you start to spend time, energy, and especially money on your business to grow it and build it, you'll realize, oh yeah, there's risk here. It's calculated risk, it's mindful, intentional risk, but there's risk. And a lot of people won't do that. A lot of people don't want to try. A lot of people feel safer working for a boss, knowing that they have a paycheck coming, or at least believing they have a paycheck coming no matter what. And to me, it's kind of a myth that these big corporations are going to take care of their employees. And that's probably why you also decide to go into your business for yourself, because you're seeing that. That's a bullshit story they tell us, that like, oh, you got to have a job because those people will take care of you. And the reality is, I mean, some companies might, but most don't. And if you have ADHD, you might be onto it faster than our people because we're pretty sensitive. And that makes us pretty insightful when we pay attention to what's coming up for us. You likely have people in your life who are like, I don't get what you're doing. You might have people supporting you, and that's wonderful. But you may also have people who don't get it and may not be supportive of you. It might be, I had a client, I don't work with her anymore. She was starting a business, and her husband, she was not working outside the home, but she was raising their two kids. She was in charge of all the laundry, the cleaning, everything. And all he did was work 40 hours. And even when he was home, he wouldn't help with the kids. I mean, not help. You're not helping with your own kids. They're your kids, but he wouldn't do anything other than sit there on his phone or watching TV. And she would say to him, listen, I need time to work on my business. And for me to do that, I need you to watch the kids, or I need you to cook dinner, or I need you to clean up after dinner. And he just wouldn't. So then her kids would be home during the day, and it was hard to get anything done. But she couldn't do it after work when he was home. So the only time she had to work on her business was like 8:30 p.m., 9 o'clock p.m. after the kids went to bed, when she was exhausted. The problem is, I was like, well, what if you get up at 5 a.m? The thing is her kids would hear her and come out and not go to bed, not go back to bed. Right. And some of that is learning to set boundaries and be like, nope, it's before your wake up time. Go sit quietly in your room. And it can be really hard if your environment isn't supportive of what you're doing, whatever that looks like. So if this is you, it may be something you have to figure out. How can I make the people in my environment be more supportive? If you're in that situation, like my former client, or if you're in a situation where you just don't have a lot of people in your life that understand it, but they're not necessarily trying to stop you from it or hindering you, you can find people who will. You can find entrepreneurial circles. I will tell you, in my program Ascend, they're these lovely women. It's a pretty small group. They're all working on their businesses. And so they get each other. I get them. They get me. It's really cool to be in a community of entrepreneurs. I have a ton of friends that are entrepreneurs. Almost all my friends are therapists or have been therapists, but I've been making more and more friends who are also entrepreneurs. But I will say most of my friends that are therapists are also in private practice, which is kind of also entrepreneurship to some degree. So it's important that you find the people in your life to help support you, because they're part of your environment. It can also be that your environment is emotionally unsafe. I know some people that I've worked with who are in big areas of the world that have a lot of conflict. And so it can feel really hard to focus on their business because their nervous system doesn't feel safe, because there's awful things happening on their street. And that doesn't even have to be like a war zone. That can be, I don't know. Everyone talks about the south side of Chicago like it's a hard neighborhood. I don't know if that's true. It doesn't even have to be a warring place like Ukraine or Palestine. It could be that you live in a rough neighborhood where you hear gunshots outside and it doesn't feel safe. But that physical environment can take a toll, because your fight or flight response is always, you're always there, you're always on guard. And it can be really hard to be creative and supportive of others if you're in that place. That one is a bigger problem than we're going to solve in a podcast episode, but it definitely is worth mentioning. Another way I see people's environments not working for them is they don't have a good place to work. They haven't found a place to work that works for them, maybe. And some may not have that space in their home, but there are a lot of places you can go do work in public. The free place that I know of is the library. So that's awesome. You can go to the library, but there's lots of places where you can work that, like a coffee shop for a cup of coffee, you can sit and work there for several hours. And that's awesome. If you're like, Jen, I don't have money for a cup of coffee, then the library, like I said, or I don't know, go to a mall where there's just like the gentle hum of the crowd and just sit there and do some work. It doesn't have to be this big giant thing. I don't know if they'd kick you out of the food court, but finding a place that's the right amount of stimulation for you, not too quiet, not too loud, for whatever you need to focus. So it can be also about your physical environment, not just the people in it. When you set yourself up for success that way by putting yourself in an environment that works for you, you're going to be able to focus better and you're going to be more productive. All right, y'all. That was a lot and all really, really important to helping us be more productive with ADHD, especially. I hope it was helpful for you. And you know what I really love? I would really love it if you would comment. Like if you'd leave a review or a comment for my podcast and be like, yeah, I like this. This was good. And if you're like, no, it was awful, Jen, I can't stand you. I mean, you can leave that too. You don't have to listen though. Just letting you know you have a choice. But I would love it if y'all would leave a comment and even share. I would love it if you would share. I want to be able to help as many people as I can. So, all right, y'all, take care. Bye bye.